This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Washington Wise is an original podcast from Charles Schwab that unpacks the stories making news in Washington right now and how they may affect your finances and portfolio. Listen at schwab.com/WashingtonWise. Heads up here before we get the show started. There are a few good-natured expletives in this episode. For the last few weeks, activist David Hogg has been on a media tour that from the outside seems a little panicked. David, how worried are you right now about the Democratic Party?
Extraordinarily worried.
Like on a 1 to 10 scale?
I would say I'm somewhere around a 7, probably.
You may remember David as a leader in the March for Our Lives movement. He's a survivor of the Parkland shooting. These days, politics is his full-time job. And as a Democrat, his main worry is about the way his party's brand seems to be in free fall. One poll has put the Democratic Party's approval rating at just 27%.
After the election, it was easy to say, well, that's just because we haven't seen what Donald Trump has done yet. And once he starts doing terrible things, then those approvals will change, and they haven't. Or if anything, they've gotten worse. And that is an indictment of our party, total indictment of our party.
And you're a vice chair of the Democratic Party.
Yes, I am a vice chair of the Democratic Party.
A lot of people, they're looking to the midterms in 2026 to kind of save the Democratic Party. But you seem even worried about those. Is that fair?
Yeah, I am worried about them. I'm more worried, frankly, about 28 because we see repeatedly the voters that are turning out in these midterms tend to be more Democratic. And I think it gives us a false sense of hope for the presidential election when these midterms, in my view, are no longer the great predictors of what's going to happen in a presidential election.
Because they're more committed voters, more educated voters turning out.
They're better informed voters, I would say. The voters that are deciding things like the presidential election are predominantly really only turning out during the presidential election, not so much during the midterms.
Last month, David announced his plan to fight off what he sees as an existential threat. His political action committee, he says, will commit $20 million to funding the candidacies of younger, more progressive congressional candidates, including those who are looking to unseat safe Democratic incumbents. This is a real throwing down of the gauntlet for a party insider.
Spicy. There's a big debate, as you saw there, inside the Democratic Party right now over the best way forward heading into the midterms.
You can imagine how members of the Democratic establishment liked this idea. David ended up in one shouting match after another with people like James Carville.
Here's the deal, James. What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Win elections against Republicans.
Can you describe the reaction you got when you explained you were going to be doing this?
Well, one, I think there was a lot of people who didn't understand the full extent of what we're doing. While we are going to be spending money in safe Democratic seats, challenging Democratic incumbents who we feel like are failing to meet the moment, we're also going to be spending it on critical purple seats that we need in order to break state legislative Republican majorities and also break the Republican majority in Congress.
Well, I mean, James Carville called you a contemptible little twerp, and I know he walked that back a bit, but it did seem to shock a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, look, there within the establishment, there's always going to be some pushback to somebody who is trying to challenge the status quo or a generation that's trying to challenge the status quo. What I will say is that despite there being pushback, obviously, in the more establishment, I've never had so many younger people, and people of all ages, frankly, but especially younger people coming up to me saying, thank you for what you're doing. And that's why I'm in this position at the DNC. I'm here to advocate for a constituency group that we are increasingly losing, which is our young people, that without there is no future of our party. Because we can't get back to winning if the only voters that we're growing in margin with are predominantly older voters and people with PhDs.
Today on the show, is David Hogg trying to fix the Democratic Party or break it? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made. 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they have avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. When people hesitate to get help, it doesn't just affect them. It impacts families, workplaces, entire communities. This Mental Health Awareness Month, let's encourage everyone to take care of their well-being and break the stigma. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network. More than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable, convenient, and serving over 5 million folks all around the world. You can join a session with the click of a button and switch therapists with no extra cost. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/whatnext to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/whatnext. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals. And here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. Did you always want to be in politics?
Not necessarily. I mean, honestly, I still wish I didn't have to be. Like, I would say I'm begrudgingly involved because I feel like I have to be in order to accomplish what I feel like our generation really needs on gun control, which is not going to come from just sitting on the sidelines and complaining about stuff. It's going to come from actually challenging people in power to do better on all the issues that we're dealing with. And when I was younger, I wanted to be a journalist, kind of frankly, in some ways like Mike Wallace, where I just wanted to scare the shit out of politicians constantly and ask them really hard questions. But I realized after the shooting, that wasn't going to be enough for me to get the outcome that I wanted, because I didn't just want to say what was wrong with our society. I wanted to talk about, well, what are we going to do to actually address it? Because that's the hard part. The hard part is, okay, what are we going to do to actually change that corrupt and broken system?
Okay, I feel very owned as a journalist right now.
Well, journalists play an incredibly important role, and it is the first step. But frankly, in my view, I was like, well, it'd be very lazy of me just to say everything that's wrong in our society rather than to try to actually say what I think needs to be done and try to make it better myself. Because that is the jump that a lot of people don't make, because it is hard. It is extremely hard because you're trying to pave a pathway forward and constantly having people try to tear it down or say that you're wrong. And you have to have the courage and self-confidence to keep going, and the friends and allies around you to keep going, even when people say it's not the right way. When the reality is, we've been listening to the same purported experts that are saying this is a terrible idea are the same ones that told us after Parkland, you can't talk about the NRA. You can't talk about banning assault weapons. You got to be very moderate on this.
Yeah.
You're in Florida. You need to only talk about, universal background checks. But we did the opposite. And we actually led so boldly that we got Republicans on the defense, where they ended up raising the age to buy a gun to 21, despite it being a Republican trifecta, and passing a red flag law that's been used over 21,000 times to save lives.
In the state of Florida. Yeah.
In the state of Florida. Just the state of Florida. I don't believe, had we just listened to those experts and said, you know what, please, let's just pass like something really basic like universal background checks, and that's it. And we're going to apologize for who we are and negotiate against ourselves, that we ever would have gotten anything in the first place. Because we've seen time and time again, when survivors of gun violence are told over and over, just wait. They really have the right intentions, but they're just going to vote this way for now. It's bullshit. It's total bullshit.
So that brings us to where you are now. In 2023, you started the Leaders We Deserved PAC. Its mission is electing younger, more diverse candidates in the Democratic Party. And then this winter, you ran for vice chair of the Democratic Party and you won. And I got to say, like, back then you sounded pretty different. You were talking about stuff like going and meeting with GOP voters and seeing, why they'd made the choices they did. You talked about like men in the Democratic Party and, making sure there was a space for them. And it feels to me like you've actually pivoted a little bit. And now you're focused in a different way on electing young primary candidates, especially in safe Democratic districts. Why the pivot?
Well, I think it's possible to acknowledge that both of these things are deeply related. I think part of the reason why we have this loss of young men and also we have the drift of the country to the right is because of our branding problem. And that starts out with who our members of Congress are and who our Democratic nominees for president are. And I realized that in my position, it wasn't, could I go out and just talk to people in red areas about why they voted the way that they did? Absolutely. And I still want to do that. I still plan on doing that. And there's a lot of work that we still have to do on younger men. But I think when I looked in front of me at what is the most tangible thing that I can do right now to help address this issue, it was helping to acknowledge the fact that this is not simply a messaging issue. This is a messenger problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where in the Democratic Party, we say all the time, our message just needs to get better. Our message just needs to get better. It's just all this vague bullshit that nobody actually says anything concrete about a lot of the time when it comes to messaging. And the fact of the matter is we had $2 billion last election cycle. We could have done all the messaging that we wanted, and we still ended up in the place that we were.
Can I get into the nuts and bolts with you? Like, you're talking about really putting forward younger candidates, probably more progressive candidates. Is there anyone you would not primary as a Democrat? Are there people where you think like, no, they're in a good position, we shouldn't touch them?
I mean, look, we're not looking to primary Jamie Raskin or Rosa in Connecticut, for example.
Rosa DeLauro.
Yeah, like really prolific progressive fighters. And it's not as simple as saying either like, well, if you're above a certain age, you shouldn't be in office. Unfortunately, there are young people who suck and there are old people who are great and vice versa. It is not as simple as just saying, well, it's not like you get above 70 and you start sucking.
So what's your litmus test?
I think our litmus test is it looks different in different districts, for one. And part of what we're looking at here is trying to make sure that the party knows it's going to be held accountable to its own values. And frankly, if there's a member of Congress that has anxiety because they hear this, they should ask themselves why that is.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my questions here is part of your mission scaring certain incumbents into changing philosophically? Sounds like it is.
Yes. Frankly, if there's anything I've learned from activism, it is that the only good politician is a scared politician. Like they will give you all the lip service that they want. They'll try to make you feel good and feel like they care. And they probably do care to some extent. But ultimately, what really shows that you care is if you actually change to address the issues of your constituents. That's what matters most.
It's interesting because I've seen you name check a really diverse group of Democrats when you talk about what you're looking for in candidates. Like you talk about Hakeem Jeffries in Congress in the same breath as AOC. And these are two Congress people with very different approaches to messaging who have sometimes been at loggerheads. And Hakeem Jeffries literally founded a PAC that was about keeping incumbents in their seats, which is the opposite of what you're doing.
Which is incredibly ironic because he got there, like AOC, through multiple Democratic primary challenges.
Yeah.
Which is the huge irony that's going on here. And I think what we're doing here is trying to address the division in the Democratic Party that I think more than anything at this point is not even so much ideological. It's that which camp are you in? Are you on the side of the tent that thinks that we need to roll over and die as our country is under assault from this man that is Donald Trump?
That is literally a quote from James Carville from an op-ed in the New York Times.
Right. And like James and I have talked, I'd say we're in a better place now. But do you buy into that notion? Because it's a comfortable one. It's an easy one for people to buy into, right? Because the answer is literally don't do anything. Or do you actually want to fight? And for me, what we're looking at here is finding people who want to fight and making sure the people that are thinking to themselves, well, I'm tired. I'm on the sidelines. I can't fight. I don't want to fight, that they should get out of the way because we need to become a party of fighters. Because right now, if you ask people in a focus group if the Democratic Party was an animal, do you know what the most common answer is?
Oh, I really want to hear this.
A turtle.
No.
You know what it is for Republicans? Lion or some other kind of apex predator.
Oh.
We say we care so much about the 99%. We say we care so much about the working class, but clearly they do not feel like we care about them because we are hemorrhaging them so quickly. And what we need to do is actually fight for our values the way that we claim to love them. Because right now, far too many people feel like we are not fighting for that. And I think what is happening is that increasingly our young people, as we say over and over again, we need to defend democracy. We need to defend democracy. We need to defend democracy. We fail to acknowledge that this is the same democracy that has put these young people through the housing crisis, that has put them through the student debt crisis, and put them through school shootings. There's so many parts of this that are indefensible. And what we need to do, in my view, is help bring in a new generation that show this is what we are doing to use democracy to fight to revive the American dream and combat corruption as well, like congressional stock trading, like our extremely broken campaign finance system, so that you know that your government represents one group, and that is you.
So that is David Hogg's pitch. After the break, plenty of people are comparing David's master plan to a progressive Tea Party. Is that a good thing?
There's a good chance you're dealing with a middleman, like me, when you get your medicines. That's because PBMs and insurers are often the same company. We even own big chain pharmacies and are buying your doctor's office. We decide what medicines you can get, where you get them, and how much you pay. It's a win-win. For me.
When middlemen own it all, you lose. Visit phrma.org/middlemen to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the U.S. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a U.S.-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
I'm William Googe, a Vury collaborator and professional ultra runner from the UK. I love to tackle endurance runs around the world, including a 55-day, 3,064-mile run across the US. So I know a thing or two about performance wear. When it comes to relaxing, I look for something ultra versatile and comfy. The Ponto Performance Jogger from Vury is perfect for all of those things. It's the comfiest jogger I've ever worn. And the DreamKnit fabric is why I'll always reach for them over other joggers. Check them out in the DreamKnit collection by going to vury.com/William. That's VUORI.com/William, where new customers can receive 20% off their first order, plus enjoy free shipping in the US on orders over $75 and free returns. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions.
A lot of people compare what you're doing right now with what happened with the Tea Party. The Tea Party sort of rose to prominence in 2008. Barack Obama had just been elected. The Republican Party was in the wilderness. And then here comes the Tea Party, which over years built a lot of power and changed and morphed. And here we are today. Do you see the Tea Party as an analog for what you're doing?
You know, it's funny you bring that up because I was at a National Finance Committee retreat, as part of the DNC. They were talking about our approval ratings in the party right now. And on the chart that they had, our approval rating was at the bottom, essentially. And I said to the data person who was presenting on this, I said, what did this graph look like for Republicans before the Tea Party happened? And you know what they said? They said it looked identical.
Whoa. And
I said, okay, got it. We got a real problem on our hands. And my fear is that if we do not show our country, if we do not show our party, if we do not show the voters who are Democrats out there that we're trying to handle this in a constructive way, we have one of two options here. We can either try to have a constructive place to have these conversations around these primaries in our safer seats to show how our party is doing its own soul searching in a very healthy and productive way to also hold itself accountable, or do nothing and probably have a wildfire that burns everything down. So my proposal is...
This is a controlled burn.
It's a controlled burn. That's what I'm trying to do here. Because I don't want it to be extremely destructive in the way that I think many elements of the Tea Party were. I want our party to use democracy to the fullest extent to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable and giving voters the option. Because an important thing to remember here is Leaders We Deserve is not deciding these elections. Ultimately, nobody is entitled to their position of power in this country because, somebody's seat who's been there for 20 or 30 years, they might feel like that's their seat, but it's not. It's their constituents' seat.
This comparison to the Tea Party, I think it's apt because it really did take that movement a couple of evolutions and many years to wind up where we are today with a Republican trifecta. Do you see this effort as something that's like a 15, 20-year long push?
I do. I hope that our democracy still exists by that point, to be honest with you. But I do. That has been my long-term goal with Leaders We Deserve, has always been, more than anything, to help bring the generation that has gone through school shooter drills and so much gun violence into office, with the hope being that, President Biden's generation, they didn't go through school shooter drills, but they did go through nuclear bomb drills. And they went on to pass some of the largest nuclear arms reduction treaties in human history. And I think part of the reason for that is they understood the anxiety of being told by your government the best it can do to protect you from a weapon of mass destruction is to teach you how to hide under your desk differently. Whereas for our generation, we're still going through drills. The difference is the bomb is going off multiple times a year for us in the form of these school shootings. So in some senses, I would argue it's even more real. The beauty of running for office is you can't just talk, unless you're a Republican, you can't just talk about what's wrong. You actually have to talk about what you're going to do to fix it. And the job of Democrats, it is always going to be harder than Republicans because unlike them, we don't run on the idea that government sucks, it's never going to work, and then get elected, do a terrible job, and then say, well, it sucks so much we need to sell it for parts to our rich friends that funded our campaigns. It is always going to be harder to try to make something work than it is to make it fail. But that is what we do here as Democrats. And what we're trying to do is by bringing in that generation that understands the anxiety of the climate crisis, of the gun violence epidemic, the student debt crisis, the housing crisis, and so much more. Hopefully, we can lay the groundwork for generations of incredible Democratic leadership to come, where when we look back in history, if you look back at whether it's LBJ, FDR, Joe Biden, or even Abraham Lincoln, all of those people all were first elected to their first position of power, their first office, before they were 30 years old. And it makes sense. If you get started that young, you know how to get shit done.
Well, arguably, some would say you could not have the experience when you're young to do the job well.
Look at the results that we have right now. If purely relying on a culture of seniority politics was the best pathway forward for our party, I would not be having this conversation with you right now because Donald Trump would not have won and our approval rating would not be at 27%. And I think there is an incredibly important role for older members of our party to play in mentoring the next generation, which is why I emphasize so strongly, this is not simply just about age. This is about competence and being able to meet the moment. And what I would say is we need an intergenerational coalition where we can't have people with the significant amount of experience that we need them to have if they cannot get elected, because there is this culture of seniority politics that just tells everybody you have to wait your turn. You have to wait your turn. When the reality is the only question that we should have for people and whether or not they get elected to a position of power is, are their voters willing to vote for them?
But your litmus test, when I listen to you explain it, where you're like, it's not age, it's something else. If I'm a member of Congress, I just think like, I don't know if I'm safe from David Hogg.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the point for you.
I mean, that is part of the point, is to make sure everybody steps up their game. There's things that all of us can do to improve. And, part of what we're looking at is, and part of the reason I can't just say like, well, here's the 3 things that you need to do to be considered effective, is it looks different in every district. And also it goes beyond just doing 3 things. It is an attitudinal shift that we need to have in our party of how are we all going to step up to the plate to do more, to meet this moment, to fight for the American people and provide an alternative vision for them that, again, is not just simply saying we're not Donald Trump.
I'm curious. You talk a lot about inefficient messengers, people who aren't like delivering right now in the Democratic Party. I know you don't want to name names here, but I am wondering, have you seen an inefficient messenger change? Like, is it a yes or no? Or is it like they can get better?
Oh, I would say so. I mean, I've seen a number of senators get much better on social media, for example, and that is not our litmus test, to be clear, but it is an important role that our party needs to do a better job of. It's like having some 20-something-year-old digital staffer tweet for a 65-plus-year-old man that is a senator in the same voice that a 20-year-old digital staffer would use on their own personal social media is not an effective strategy, in my opinion. It needs to actually sound authentic. I think part of the reason why AOC is such an effective communicator, for example, on social media is because she's clearly not scripted. And I have seen a number of senators that refreshingly, have gotten much better on social media and talking about the bills they're working on, talking about what Donald Trump is doing and talking direct to camera about it. But it's never going to be as good as it is when there are young people who are digitally native who've done prolific jobs at actually communicating what the hell Democrats are doing to fight to help everyday people.
You've talked a bit about your own regret after the last presidential election. Like, you met with Joe Biden and he asked how he should attract young voters, and you said you wish you told him to drop out. Is that your only regret? I sort of wonder. Like, I wonder if, looking back now, there are other things you think, like, I wish I'd done more here.
I mean, it's kind of challenging because I also wonder, like, how much would it have even mattered? Because I did say, like, we have major problems with young men. We have major I'm worried about younger voters. And the only let me think for a second here. I wish that I had communicated more inside of the administration to say, like, simply saying, because, like, I didn't feel like the economy was doing great either. Even though I knew all the statistics told me that I shouldn't necessarily feel that way, that should be an indicator to our party that something is seriously off, either with how we're analyzing those statistics or how they're being calculated. And I think part of what happened is our party, a lot of the consultants and other people managing the messaging, they're wealthy. Like, their cost of living actually went down significantly during COVID in many senses, because most people, their biggest expense is their home, is their housing. And a lot of the people that are managing the messaging of our party own their homes. They have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage that they also probably refinanced during COVID, if they were smart. And overall, as inflation went up and their interest rates went down and they have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, their cost of living is going down over time. Whereas the actual base of our party, that, younger people of color, younger people in general, and a lot of people that are renters around this country that are disproportionately young, we're seeing their rents skyrocket. And even if their incomes increased, it still feels like a pay cut because their rents have gone up, 20 or 30 or 40% in many of the major areas that we needed these voters the most. And it's going to cause a natural shift. When you tell somebody that you don't understand the economy is doing great because this chart says it is, even if you don't feel that way, that's not a good messaging strategy. What we needed to talk about is what I wish I had said more internally, was to say, like, we actually have to address how people are feeling, not just what the statistics are telling us they should be feeling.
David Hogg, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
David Hogg is a vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, and he's the co-founder of the PAC, Leaders We Deserve. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige, Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, Isabel, Angell, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky, say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.
At Planet Fitness, we're declaring it. This is the year of getting stronger, and you can get started now by saving when you join today. We have all the best-in-class equipment you could ever need, and you can work out your way on your time at any convenient location near you. Most open 24 hours. So let's do this. Join Planet Fitness today and save. Just $1 down, $15 a month.
Offer ends May 16th.
See Home Club for details.